Hello everybody, welcome to the stream this morning. Today, as my LinkedIn post and the schedule says, we've got Laura Overton with us. Laura obviously was on the first stream and contributed massively to the last stream we had regarding engagement. She's got a really good insight on how we're going to engage with people or learners from a content perspective today, and probably touch on some other themes as well, as these kind of things often go in a direction that's kind of guided by where we go with our conversations and also the chat. So the couple of things to begin with, please post into the chat. The chat is there for you to interact with us, ask us questions in the moment. So the more you do that, the more you'll get out of it. Second is, if you know of anybody this would be useful to, please tweet it out, put it on LinkedIn, any other methods that you use, your internal Slack channels, Teams, whatever. Just good to get the group of people on here bigger and bigger every time we go live. But without more further ado, I will introduce Laura. So, Laura, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. It's fantastic to be back with you again. I've been really enjoying this live chat series, and have to say that this topic is completely close to my heart. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Perfect. Sorry, Laura, we've just got a couple of challenges on stream with your camera just taking a while to feed through, but I think that's probably more an internet issue from one side or another, but it will come through momentarily. So,
Fine, I quite like the black box.
well, it's early in the morning. Well, I say early, it's 10 o'clock, but yeah, so how do we, where's a good place to kick this off? Is it worth us doing a quick recap on what we touched on last time about the areas and maybe just delving into a bit of that? Because I know you were very involved in the chat last time on that stream. So would that be a good place to start?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's always good, a bit of a recap, isn't it?
Great.
Because
So
I think these things are important to see the whole context.
couldn't agree more. Give me two. So let's jump to that transition slide. Sorry, that slide that we showed last time. So hopefully everyone on screen can see that there is the slide that we discussed last time, showing the areas of discussion. Any thoughts on where we went last time, Laura? I've just heard the sound's gone. We've got it from us. It's definitely recording my side. Give me 2 seconds, everybody. Let's just see if we can get this back up and running. Maybe I need like a technical difficulties. Can you hear? Can anybody post in the chat if you can? Can you hear me talking right now? Just wait for chat to come back and have a.
Okay,
It looks
so
like
shall I? Okay.
it might just be, yeah. So everybody says they can hear me. Thank you,
Okay.
Peter and Bruce. So we've got. I wonder why that's not pulling that through.
So I keep talking.
I'm just changing one more setting, everyone, just to make this a bit more stable. Can anybody else, in a moment, if Laura starts talking, can everyone just say if they can hear her? Thank you. Okay, we've got some weird things going on. That's fine. We've just
Hey.
we'll just monitor the sound. If people could post into chat like they are doing, that's excellent because it's helping us understand what's going on. Yeah, it's a funny one. Very odd. So yeah, please
Don't
please continue,
repeat
Laura.
yourself. We need you, Tom.
Well, normally it doesn't do that, so I'm not sure what's going on today. So we'll have to check that one out. But yeah.
We need you, Tom. Can you hear me now, guys? Hopefully. Let's hope that you can now hear me. I'll keep going. Test, test, test. I love this. It's it was always been an experiment. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us. The wonders of technology in a digital age.
Absolutely. Now, what I was saying about this slide is there's a lot of technology, and we like to be able to experiment with technology. And in fact, it's one of the things that learning and development have been doing quite a lot of over the last 30 years that I've been in the industry. And experiments are good. We appreciate the fact that they don't always work. Hence, thank you for your patience on this live chat today. But I think one of the things that I've always been looking for is what technology can help deliver better value back to business, not just in terms of efficiency. And I know a number of these tools can really help us there, but also in terms of what we can do for the business and for the individuals that are within our organisation. And I think that's really always been my main interest and my main concern. But what I've always found is when I've looked at the number of people using these tools, and about 80% of us are using online learning and similar numbers about webinars and live systems has gone up even more in the last few weeks. But it's not the tools themselves that correlate and have a relationship back with the business values. They're enablers, but they never actually directly correlate back. So I think that for me is one of the key things, that when we're designing an engaging experience and we're thinking about the individual, and that individual in the middle of the picture here is the most important thing, and understanding what it is that we need to achieve from that person. So I think for me, it's important to understand that we haven't just got content and platforms to put content out. We can connect with people, we can engage with people, but we don't have to be able to use this technology just for delivering content. I think that's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction that many of us have had in the online learning business for many, many years. It's always our first place of call in good instructional design, good content, but actually we should be thinking about what can we do with that content and what are they trying to do differently. So I think that's really my main point. And you have really flagged that last time we were speaking. It was really talking about making it easy for people to be able to do their job and starting with the end result in mind, and then designing to have the best way of meeting those objectives. So that's what I really loved about the last session. But it's that person in the middle that I'd really like to concentrate on today with you, Tom, if that's okay.
Perfect. So is that a perfect point to lead us on to the first question or first slide? So perfect. So let's just do that. So just let me load into my images. Bear with me 2 seconds. So
I think I'd like to ask the audience a question now that we're back and up and running and you can hear again. What focus do you have, guys, on learner engagement? Do you have challenges with learner engagement? Because typically that I've always found that we spend a lot of time working on the tools that we can see on the screen at the moment, but not many people connect with them. They're following our passion. So do you guys find that there has been traditionally a reluctance to get involved with new ways of learning? What about learner engagement in your organisation? Love to hear your views in the live chat.
Whilst we wait for that, I'm just pulling in this image now. Just proving a little challenging for it to load in for some unknown reason. May have to do this manually. Let's do it manually. Hopefully we can see that on screen. So the first question we're asking today is, are we boxing our staff in? So great question. I love the graphic as well. Very uniform there, which I suppose is kind of the idea of, are we kind of putting people into nice little packages? But But yeah, that's a great question, Laura. Please elaborate. What do you think of that?
I think one of the things I've seen over the last number of years is that often when we ask learning and development people, a lot of them say there's a challenge with getting our staff to engage with these new platforms. We talk about experience design, and even getting, some of these new elements coming through. It's just a real challenge for us. And when I've asked the question in my previous work, what is the biggest barrier to your success in using these technologies in learning? Well, I've found that nearly 2/3 of learning and development leaders say, actually, our staff don't know how to learn. They don't know how to discipline themselves to learn in this way, and they actually see a lot of reluctance of staff. I've also seen people boxing people in the sense of, putting our perspective, just because they're not engaging with our platform doesn't mean to say that they are not able to learn. And I think that that's one of the boxes that we put people on. And also the other thing that I've seen that we box people in on is, I hate to bring it up, but I'm going to, that thorny issue of learning styles. Now, there's been some amazing work done on looking at whether learning styles actually exist, whether there's any scientific background. Strongly recommend looking at Will Thalheimer and the Debunk Club on learning styles, because basically we adapt. We all know that, and that's one of the reasons we've got this going on at the moment. So I think sometimes we actually focus too much on boxing people in, because once things are boxed neatly, and millennials is another great one for that.
Yeah.
Once people box things in neatly, then it means that we can do a factory approach to addressing those issues. It allows us to be a lot more efficient by creating nice boxes. But actually, organizational learning, helping individuals perform at their best at the point where they're at, is very complicated and complex. And I think we are challenged by sometimes our own thinking, our own biases. We read something that millennials like games, and think, oh, well, I've got a game, so that's handy. I'm going to start bringing my games in, and as you said last time, that doesn't, just because it's there doesn't mean to say it's going to be the most appropriate thing.
Yeah.
And I think Dimitri's point as well about that complexity of the organisation. It's just not just about the individual not knowing how to learn, or the individual, but the context, the managers that they're involved in. I think this is also really, really important, and we need to be able to look at that whole picture when we're looking at meeting the needs of that individual in the middle of your picture earlier. I mean, what do you think, Tom? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, to Dimitri's point there, the point about management, I've seen a lot of programs fail and also succeed based upon managerial leadership buy-in. Just to touch on that, but in terms of being boxed in, I fall into that millennial category. It'd be fair to say that I've been pushed a fair amount of training that is supposed to quote unquote suit my learning style. The reality is, it's kind of a funny thing. In so many ways in learning, we look at things like, well, let's have a personal development discussion. So it's about you, the individual, and how you need to grow and how you need to. It's about your competencies, your abilities, your skills, and where you'd like to go. And then suddenly, you actually then often get to whether it be a learning experience platform, learning management system, or just a suite of content you've got access to. And it's then, right, now, because you're no longer the individual, you are now going to fall neatly into these buckets. And that doesn't necessarily align to the personal development discussion you just had. So I think in part, L&D are good at focusing on the individual and not putting people into boxes. And then, whether it's from an administrative perspective, whether it's because that's the way that vendors are presenting content to people, by the way they curate, people end up in boxes. I think with the way the technology is going, though, with AI and things like that, we're able to put people less into a proper box and allow it to be more free flow. Definitely, that's what we try to do at Valamis, but it's a shift that's taking place. I still see L&D functions kind of still looking at neat places to put people.
Yeah.
And the reality is that isn't true. People learn in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a shift. I really do. And maybe what we're going through right now is another. Well, obviously, it's a difficult circumstances, but it's definitely opening up people's minds inside and outside of L&D to the possibilities of working remotely, and delivering something remotely, whether it's learning or some other piece of content. So maybe we'll see something different as we come out of this pandemic, where there maybe is more openness to other routes, and therefore understanding that we can't all conform to a set view of the world. That's my view, I think.
Yeah. And I think also one of the challenges that we've had in the past is that these kind of programs and these platforms that we've had have been separate. I've had a lot of feedback from conversations that I've been having with learning leaders quite recently, is that the engagement on their platforms is going through the roof. If they've got different resources and libraries, people are connecting in, they're using a lot more of the features. But again, one of the challenges is that we might have the danger of thinking, well, actually, that's success for us, and actually engagement is success. But I'd like to suggest that we need to go deeper. We need to go, not just are they using what we've got, but why are they using it, and how can we help them do their job, live their lives, balance their current situation in a way that is a lot more effective and a lot more helpful. And I think it's really interesting that Andrew is talking about perspective, and the question about learner engagement. It doesn't matter. I think, Andrew, I agree with you. Is that we are doing things for ourselves because they're relevant to us. And I've talked a lot in the research work is those organisations that get able to get better value from their learning, able to shift culture, able to drive productivity, tend to be when the L&D people have moved over from being producers of learning to enablers of learning, and picking up on those independent things and helping you get there closer to that environment. So I think, Andrew, that's a really important point there.
Yeah. On that point as well, and the second of the 2 points that Andrew's placed into the chat there as well around is if your learning team is able to pick up or capture all the independent things that you're doing, that is becoming more and more possible. Data capture in general and the ability to, for one system or a data set to talk to another data set, is increasingly possible. And that's kind of actually touched on what Phil's talking to some extent as well. But it is possible to do that. The question is, how well is your L&D function or the L&D team set up to do that? I'm not saying it's new. The ability's been there for some time, but the depth of knowledge that we can get now and the links that we can make in with data, as we will cover on a stream later in this series, are quite profound. There's a webinar that Valamis are hosting on Wednesday, which is dealing specifically with data and learning. If anybody's interested in that seems like a good little segue, a little plug for that webinar as well. We'll post the details out of that. We'll get those for the end of this stream so that everyone can see them, and we'll put the link in the description as well. But the data piece is doable. The question is, how well connected is learning to those other data sources? And it sounds simple, but it's not always. There's politics at play. There's sometimes data security and things of that nature, and then sometimes even there's HR challenges. Workers' councils, for example, that exist in Germany find it a challenge compared to places like the US or the UK, where maybe data is easier to share. So that's just my two pence on that one. But Laura, your thoughts?
Yeah. No, definitely. The data is helpful. It's useful, but you in the last session talked about us needing a hypothesis first What is it that we're trying to achieve? And I think all good research questions or research programs actually start with the question. And Philip has asked this question about how much do we need to consult with learners. I think that's not necessarily do we need to consult with learners, but we do need to start actively listening to learners. And one of the things that I identified, and I'd like to come back to this data question in a moment's time, but one of the things I identified in the research was there's a lot of L&D people were saying, our learners don't get this. It's their fault almost, passing the baton on learners and sometimes the managers. Whereas actually we didn't ask individuals about how they learn. To Andrew's point, we as learning and professionals, only a quarter of us, last time that I was doing this research, for the last report that I wrote at the beginning of last year, only 24% of L&D leaders were proactive in understanding how their staff learn. Just asking the question, let alone using data. And yet the high-performing learning organizations, it was 80% of them were proactive in engaging in that conversation.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share some data with you from that last research report that I did called the Transformation Journey. You can find it by Googling Transformation Journey Towards Maturity or going onto the Emerald Works site. Because we started to say, okay, L&D believe certain things about, we're boxing our learners in, but actually learners, as you rightly point out, Andrew, we're doing things for ourselves, particularly when it's helpful, when it's useful, when it's relevant to getting that job done. So we started to go out to individual learners within organizations, and over the period of time where I was running this research program, over 50,000 individuals completed what we called our learning landscape study, just to understand how people are doing this. Now, did we trust that data? Well, it was self-reported, but it gave really interesting insights into how people perceived their learning journey.
Yeah.
We didn't ask, what learning do you like? What do you want mobile? Do you want games or anything like that? But we asked the question, what do you find the most useful to actually learn what you need in your job? And when you ask that, the question itself is a reflection point, because it's very rare that we, Philip, consult with our learners or even ask them the question, I'm really interested, how does this work for you?
Yeah.
And people's individual stories are powerful data sources. I love the fact that Brené Brown calls stories data with soul. We can see patterns in stories. We can get behind the skin of stories. And when we asked that question, we found that something like 91% of learners said collaborating with others was useful. 81% said their manager support was useful. 70% said a mentor or a coach. Nearly 60% said job aids were useful. 40%, 44% at the time said videos and podcasts were useful. Now that is probably changing now.
Oh yeah,
it's probably everything's shifting now. But just asking the question, what do you find useful? How can we help you do your job better? And not how can we create a course for you, but how can we help you? Listening is the really important start point of this journey. The data can fill in some of the gaps. The data can fill in gaps of, okay, you say you're using, and this comes back to your point, Philip, about people say that they're using video, but are they using our video? Because then that flags another question. If they're not using your video, but they say they're using video, where are they going?
Yeah.
What are they finding helpful and useful? And maybe there's an opportunity there for us to curate the things that are useful rather than create the content. Just to, as you said last week, make things simpler, make things easier. And I think when we actually look at some data about people, what motivates people, where are they going, where they're hanging out. I know, Tom, you're a big fan of working out where people are hanging out. I think that's massively important for us to get under the skin of the individuals to work out the best ways that we can help them.
Yeah. I'm thinking we're going close to this, like one of the areas that you want to talk about, Laura. Is it worth showing that image? I just realised there's so
Yeah.
much that we're literally talking about the exact topic, so it makes sense to jump to it.
Yeah.
Please talk us through this. It's great.
Let's have a look at that, because this is just taken out of the transformation curve, the slide that Tom's going to be bringing up. And a question I have for you as an audience, I know it's quite small here, but this shows you are actually, to be honest, in the middle of the average of around about 5,000 learners in 1 year. And the purple is those that are under 30, and the blue is those that are over 50. So immediately we can see that there aren't a lot of really significant differences between ages. So let's debunk that one up front.
Yeah.
But if the question I used to like to ask is, if these were learners in your department, would this insight shift the way that you are thinking about creating solutions for them? Would the fact that 55% of them are working trial and error, and they find that really useful to help them learn something new, would that influence the way that you are designing your learning program? You know, if, for example, let's have a look here, you realize actually 78% of them in the top corner, how do you like to learn? So actually technology, I like to learn through technology. You know, would that influence the way that you're thinking about the design of your leadership program? By the way, leaders are actually, all our data, when we cut by leaders, then, you know, there wasn't a great big deal of difference on here. The fact that 76% say their motivation to learn online is to do their job faster and better. You looked at your courses or your programs or your initiative right now, and actually, to be honest, right now, probably you are really helping people do their job faster and better. You're probably helping them to adapt. But your normal program, your normal curriculum, can you really honestly look at that and say, yeah, these are the ways in which this program will help you do your job faster and better. So I think it's not necessarily, Philip, about how much data do we believe, but does the data in front of us help us ask smarter questions of ourselves? Does it help us challenge ourselves? Because if we're willing to be challenged, then the chances are we're able to come up with new and creative ways of really connecting with people at a level that is meaningful to them. And I think if we don't remember anything else from this conversation today, that's the important thing. How can we connect with our staff? And if data can help us connect in a more meaningful, more relevant way with those individuals, then that's powerful. I mean, Tom, if you look at this data here, I know it's relatively new to you.
Yeah.
How would it influence you in designing a program? And also, I'd love live chat. I'd love to get your observations on anything here that is surprising or anything that you've leveraged before. So Tom, have you kind of connected into any of these areas before when you've been designing them?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if we look at just the modality down the left, which is I'm kind of chunking that into the term modality, even though I think there's a couple of things that may not necessarily sit within there. Um, I suppose what's interesting to me is there's some real top performers there at the top of the list, and then a lot of it sits in the middle ground. There's this real flex of, who that may or may not suit. As you said, what's super interesting is the fact that largely the audience, the type of audience is in terms of its demographic, is pretty much the same, with some minor exceptions and variances. So I think from my perspective, I would be looking at this and going, okay, maybe I should stop worrying so much about if I pick one of the more, let's say, if I'm trying to deliver a piece of content or design a piece of an ongoing course, I would look at the pieces that seem to resonate most with my audience. It's also worth bearing in mind that this data set is specific. This is an industry-wide study, I assume, isn't it, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, apologies for my dog in the background there. Again,
Welcome
the
to the
test
new
of working from
normal.
home, yeah. But what I would be looking at is what is it like in my organisation, because I would suspect there'll be trends that follow this, but again, it would depend upon your audience. And I'd have to listen to that data. I wouldn't take this as arbitrary information that's going to map directly to my organisation. So that's the first point. But I would pick those ones that seem to have most relevance and most resonance with our audiences, and probably then I wouldn't actually start creating training. What I'd be doing is delving deeper into those areas to understand
Yeah,
what specifically about those
yeah,
makes a difference. To your point about video, what makes a good video? Why are they engaged in it? We do a lot of looking into or tracking of data on platform on video. And one of the things that we try to help L&D functions understand is from a structural design perspective, knowing where someone stops and starts a video, where how much of it they skip, which is achievable by tracking with XAPI. Then you start to build up a profile of how the behavior inside your content. And that to us is the important piece of data rather than, yes, are people engaging with it? Obviously, you need them to be engaging with it to get that data in the first place, but it's important. But then when they're in it, what's happening? And that can help you build a profile of a 15-minute video might get a load of people dropping out by minute 3 or 4, whereas shorter 3 minute, maybe 4 minute videos actually results in much better retention and engagement across that audience space. So the type of video, the way we present it is important, or is as important, maybe even more so than the fact we're using video in the first place. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah. Absolutely. And I think how and why you want to use video needs to be linked into what people need. And in what ways will your video be relevant
Yeah.
to them right now? And I think what's really interesting is those challenge buckets in the bottom corner there. That it's uninspiring. If the content's not relevant, it will be uninspiring. It doesn't have to be incredibly produced, but it has to be immediate, meaningful, now, and relevant to the individual and helping them to do their job better. And I think that's one, if people are cutting out of your video, even if it's the most ideal time, it's probably because it's not the most relevant piece of content.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's also about not being able to find what they need.
Yeah.
Often, if I need something to help me right now and I can't get to it, I think is a really important aspect of the work that we were doing is to again, you who talked about it last week, how do we simplify people's access to what's important and relevant to them? So this is a data set, and it you're right, Tom, in that if the kind of question I used to ask, if these were your staff, how would you respond differently? But these are just a few of the types of questions that you might want to engage in conversation with right now. Build up your own map, your own landscape. We used to talk a lot about the fact that if you understand the learning landscape of your organisation, where people are going, what people are doing, asking them to reflect and do it more consciously, you'll actually find that where you thought you had a big mountain to overcome, you haven't. You've got a great straight road that you can run by because people are doing it already.
Yeah.
And other areas, for example, we've done this with some organisations who are heavily committed to going down a mobile learning route. And then they realised actually that people were uncomfortable about using their own data and their own phones, and they like to keep life separate. And so it gave them an insight that was different in terms of saying, okay, well, how is the best way of meeting your need?
Yeah.
In the way, so understanding your learning landscape and having some data behind that actually is very powerful and to challenge yourself, but also to challenge line managers. Dimitri earlier was talking about line managers don't engage, and if you're able to say, well, actually, this is what your team are doing right now, and they are saying this is what they need, then maybe that data that can help open up a conversation with line managers if you didn't have before. So being an active listener, I think, is a really important aspect of this. It's very easy for us to jump into data.
Yeah.
What does the platform say? Where are people going? Where are they cutting out? What are they using? All of those types of things. But to actively listen means to ask the question of yourself, why? Why are they saying that? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And that active listening, I think, is massively important
I
for us. It creates, it helps us to refocus our own minds.
Yeah.
And we've had to do that in the last few months.
Laura, I can.
And sorry.
Sorry, I can see you teeing up the next slide. I just wanted to say something before we moved on from this section, but
Yeah,
by all means
yeah,
continue.
please.
Well, I was just going to say, ask the chat really, does anyone find this data encouraging? Because from my perspective, Laura asked me the question before about how would I react to this, and you, her, and I touched on it last time. Is there is no one set way. There's lots of ways to connect with people, lots of modalities, and the reality is here. We said it was about on the last stream. We said it was about choosing the most appropriate way to communicate with people. And surely this list, particularly on the left, shows you that there is more than one way to connect to someone and an audience. And it might be that you provide resources in a number of those areas simultaneously, if that's a choice that you want to make, to allow a true choice for the learner to go through the learning in the way that they see fit. But fundamentally, you don't have to go down the mobile only or the video only or the face to face only route. Is that encouraging for people? Yeah, Pete in the chat there, looks like people are willing to experiment and keen to learn. Yeah, I completely agree. So again, back to the original question, Laura, of it's not about putting people into boxes, because clearly the fact that so much data there sits in that well, there's such a spread, even at the lower end where there's MOOCs. I would still say it's a relatively high statistic for MOOCs at 38% of people wanting to engage in those. That's fundamentally, 40% of the audience in this test, or this survey data was actually open to the idea of using MOOCs or finding them useful. So,
and they're doing them in their own way and their own time. And I say this data was gathered actually at a time when most people thought that staff were not engaging online. Now we know people are engaging online. It will have shifted dramatically, but after, when we start to settle down into new ways of working and new ways of learning, how much of what we're doing will be sticking. I think what's interesting about this environment is that it's surfacing engagement. It's surfacing new ways of engagement, new normals for the audience that we're working with. And we're going to have to challenge our thinking. It's not just about putting only all of our courses online for a moment and then going back to normal with the classroom. But actually, in what ways can we use those different modalities that you talked about last time to connect and engage and help workers in a new way? And I think that's actually quite exciting. I mean, it would be good if we could look at the benefits of listening more actively to learner time. So I think that for me, that creates, when I was doing this piece of work directly with individual organisations and then looking at the data as well, I found it absolutely fascinating. It was my favourite part of the research programme that we did, was every time an organisation's insight and data around their learners came in. My God, it was just, oh wow, look at that. We did a piece of work, it's in the public domain, with Qantas, and there was a general perception that actually all the baggage handlers they wouldn't do anything like this kind of online learning. And it turns out that they were doing an awful lot more, and it completely changed the way that the L&D people in that environment thought about how they supported those baggage handlers when we get them to connect and engage. I mean, active listening is so important. It's the context of using data. And I'd love to get people's views on the benefits of listening actively and to our audience. We tried to touch on them today. If anything resonated with our audience today, because I'm conscious of time running out, But Tom, is there any benefits from your side of things that you've seen in terms of actively listening to users?
Yeah, I think I touched on this in a previous stream, this specific example around self-authoring, but the company in question that ended up delivering 90% of its training content via self-authoring means was, the reason they went down that route was because they were told by their learner community, their staff, that essentially they weren't in touch with the business, and the most rapid way that L&D function then decided they could get in touch with the business was by not trying to partner better, which they obviously did, but it was more a case of, well, let's involve you, let's make you part of L&D, and immediately they gained credibility because it was the real frontline people doing the work, and then therefore the video content. It actually reduced their workload, which actually enabled them to then do the thing I was saying, which is partner better on the large scale projects that are less tactical and more strategic. They were able to do that in a much more efficient and much more in-depth way than they'd previously been able to. So I think for that organisation, the key there was understand the feedback from their people. And I can't quite remember if it came via a survey or if it came via some form of interview process or anything like that through the one-to-ones. I can't quite recall. It was some time ago. But the reality is, it doesn't matter how you get it. The key is, as you said, they're actively listening to their population. There was a point in time where they went, we're hearing that we are not in tune with our business. What are we going to do about it? And then put a solution in place. What's one thing as well I'd like to just touch on before, because I'm sure there's some people in the chat talking, and I'm sure you've got a follow-up point, but throughout today's stream, and actually before that, and we'll probably continue to be this way, but we talk about the term data, and Phil even mentioned it earlier. Is it data or is it consulting with the business or something along those lines? I don't really see those two things as different. To me, if I consult with someone or I have a conversation, in my head that's data. If I find some statistics on a spreadsheet about how many people are engaging with a piece of content, that's data. Business performance in relation to learning they've been through, that's a data source. I look at it and go, essentially, and I know this maybe why the term data isn't that great, it's information at the end of the day, which you can use to better craft how you engage with your audience, or what content you push to them, or how you set up the processes that you have within your business. But the idea to me that data and, let's take this topic, data and listening are somehow different. They're not to me. Listening is a data collection method. It's just that it's not structured data, and it's not a number on a spreadsheet. It's something that is between you and that individual, or you and that user group. And that's the way I look at things. So I just look at it as information with which I can use to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I would underline here is actively.
Yeah.
Because even when we get into consulting mode, sometimes we can think, well, I'm following my consulting process.
Yes.
And therefore, I'm not genuinely listening, genuinely interested, genuinely me willing to be challenged.
Yeah.
Because often I'm looking to consult in a way that says, okay, let me advise you on the best solution.
Yeah.
We are consulting to create a solution. Whereas I think this process of proactively understanding how our staff currently learn is a 2 ears and 1 mouse ratio. It's genuine interest because I want to know. And I think right now in this environment, I think we're hungry to know how people are responding. We can genuinely listen authentically because we don't know what's working for people right now. So asking them, what's working for you? How can I help? What do you need to do in your job and your role? And being genuinely interested in the answer. It builds our empathy. It creates our focus. One of the things that I found, that stat earlier about only 25% of us are being proactive in understanding how our staff learn, that active, proactive environment of saying, oh, tell me what's happening. That correlated consistently over a period of 3 to 4 years to an improved continuous learning culture. It correlated to better application of learning, better speed of response to changing business needs, agility, improved communication and teamwork, better self-directed learning. They're just listening. Obviously, it's not just listening, it's how you respond to that is important. But that proactive listening really made a difference. And I'd love to give an example actually of a fireside chat I heard this week, and can send the link out to people, with Rachel Hudson from Hilti, who listened to her organisation and found out that what they were doing in the early days was not working for them at all. It was all classroom, and their staff were saying, this isn't working for me any longer. So they started to make a shift to get learning to much closer to the point of need. And they did different trainings for their learning and development team. And one of the training programs they went on was working with the 70-20-10 Institute on their expert program on how to really listen to the need first, get aligned to business, and, as you said, Tom, move over into empowering individuals and learners. And they found at the time, half of the organisation of L&D completed that program and that process of training themselves up, and half of them didn't. But what Rachel was saying last week is that those that really got into this proactive role were much easier able to adapt. That not only did they have more content already online, but their managers were more connected, they were already speaking the same language, and the learners themselves were already felt more empowered. So one of the benefits of proactively listening is actually we work out ways to empower our staff in smarter ways, and our role is shifting slightly. I found that conversation absolutely fascinating last year, and hopefully it's kind of an inspiration for others here, and we can certainly make a link to that chat available to people, because I'm conscious of the time running out, Tom.
No, so am I, and I think I'd like to open it to chat to put any final comments or questions in there. But something I just want to add is when you talk about active listening or proactive listening as well. I think one of the best ways that I've found over the years, whether it was in the coaching capacity or from a business partnering L&D capacity, was it's to nurture that interest, and that it's almost create a behaviour or a habit of being interested in what people are doing and how they're doing it, and that helps you to go into that that almost automatic or passive state of listening, irrespective of the situation. Sometimes it can be a challenge, and I find myself, like your point, Laura, saying you go into that consultant mode and got to stop yourself answer preparing or solutionizing before you have all the information. But the key for me is finding that way to make a habit out of listening, and making it more habitual, as I said. Any other questions? I can see there's a couple that came through whilst we were talking. I think they were touching on the point.
I love this question from Pete about frustrations and obstacles, because learner engagement definitely, I could see from my own research, was a frustration. The fact that we were overwhelmed and underskilled was a major frustration for a lot of learning and development teams. But I think your second part of your question about the obstacles that cause inefficiencies and waste, I think, Pete, that actually our inability to be proactively listening to the context that we're operating in, the individuals, the line managers, that is one of the biggest causes of learning and development inefficiency and waste, because we are not directing our resources in the way that's going to add the most end use value to the organisation. We talked about this right up front, Tom, didn't we? I talked about Laurie Niles-Hoffman, who's going to be your speaker on Thursday afternoon. Amazing triage tree that she had about learning and development that really helped us, Pete, to address where we place our attention right now in order to really add that value back to business. So definitely recommend that we share that link again as well.
Yeah,
A great question.
I have the details here. So for anybody that's interested, so we will post this into the link, the description, sorry, of this recording of the webinar, and I will also be putting this out on my LinkedIn. So if anybody connects with me, you'll see that as an update, either later today or tomorrow. I've bombarded LinkedIn a fair bit this morning for this stream, so I don't want to be blacklisted by anybody. But the details are, it's on Thursday the 23rd, so this Thursday. It's at 9 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central for American time zones. 3 p.m. Central European time, 2 p.m. British Standard Time. Details are on the Valamis website. It's on our front page, but as I say, we'll stick the link up so you can quickly get to it. No problems there. But really great speaker. I mean, as you said, Laurie, so insightful, and every time I hear a webinar or have a conversation with her myself, it's always interesting. And she shares some of my opinions and has some of her own around, obviously data and things like that. So it's a really interesting person I find to talk to. So great stuff there. Any other questions in the chat before we sign off for the day? I mean, whilst that might happen, thank you, Laura. Again, your input as ever has been excellent, invaluable, some would say. Are we going to get you on another stream? Is that happening? I don't know. We are doing a webinar. Laura and I will be doing a webinar in May at some point. But are you joining again live on stream, Laura? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh, that only depends if you invite me,
there you go.
Tom. And given all the technical issues, I will leave that one up to you.
I thought this morning when everything was so smooth, Laura, I was like, this one's fine, this one's fine. But for some reason, the technology decides to change and operate in a completely different way than it did last stream. So I can't make any promises, but let's just see what happens. Thank you, Andrew, for the feedback. Great to hear that. This video will be live as we stop streaming momentarily. Please share it with people in your network if you can do so.